Mute. Mute. Close. Video. Recording. Yes, start. Shavua Tov. Thank you for coming for these Divrei Hitorerut, proceeding Selichot. I don't know how many people have had the chance to catch up on the news since Shabbat. We're looking for Divrei Hitorerut. If you haven't heard the news, there was over Shabbat, there was an earthquake in Morocco. Over 1,000 people killed, many hundreds more injured, displaced, homeless. I'm not going to pretend to presume to know what this means, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is thinking. Why certain people are hit and others are not, and why certain people die. None of us can explain it. But if we're looking for Divrei Hitorerut, if we're looking for something to shake us up out of our complacency, we just have to listen. Just have to look at what's going on around us in the world to hear these things, to hear a human tragedy of that extent, to remind us of our own frailties, to remind us of our own weaknesses, to remind us of our own uncertainties. We don't know what will be today. We don't know what will be tomorrow. But Baruch is sending us messages. He wants us to wake up. So let me begin with a story. Let me share with you a story that happened to me about 8 years ago. It was a few days after Sukkot. The connection between this and Selichot will become clear soon enough. As I said, about 8 years ago, it was a few days after Sukkot. After the second set of holidays had ended, the kids were back at school, things were getting back to normal. So we thought. And one day, as we continuing the normal routine, I was fetching my son from Gan. At the time it was on, I think it was the 3rd floor, the Gan where he was. So I carried him down the stairs and we got to the bottom. I was strapping him into the pram. As we were getting ready to go home, my phone rang. So I picked it up and I saw that my wife was calling. So I answered the phone. And on the other end, it was not Sarah. There was a man's voice, a total stranger who I did not know. And panic started to set in. And he said to me, the first thing he said was, everything's okay. You know, when they tell you everything's okay, you know that something's wrong. And he said, everything's okay. I'm just calling to tell you I'm here with your wife. She's in an ambulance. She's being taken to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. The conversation was in Hebrew. So he said, she's broken her karsol. And the first thought that went through my head was, what in the world is a karsol? This was a Hebrew word which I did not know at the time. I know it very well now. It means ankle. Ankle. And what had happened, as I said, this was a few days after Sukkot, after Simchat Torah. Sarah had gone to an appointment in town, and there had been some branches left over on the sidewalk. And she had to make the split-second decision. Do I walk onto a busy road, or do I carry on walking on the pavement over some branches? How slippery can the branches be? Turns out very slippery. And she slipped, she broke her ankle, and this was when I received this phone call. Cut a long story short, taken to hospital, 2-week hospital stay, orthopedic surgery, 6 weeks in a cast, months and months afterwards of physiotherapy, learning how to walk again. So at this point, I'm sure you're all thinking, what in the world does this have to do with Selichot and Rosh Hashanah? And the truth is, all of this, I tell you the story as an introduction to the next story. Because the person who made that phone call that day had the presence of mind, along with calling the ambulance and helping us and doing all that needed to be done at the time. But he had the presence of mind to realize there might be a legal case. Somebody left an impediment on the sidewalk and caused a personal injury. So he stopped, he took some photographs, he gave us his phone number. He said, I know you've got other things on your mind now, but when the time comes, if you decide to sue, to take legal action, I'll come and I'll be a witness. So we fast forward a few years, and after a number of delays, and the court case takes place. And at this time, we had already left for Selichot. We were in London. We were meant to fly back to Israel for the court case. Something called Corona happened. It was postponed a few times. Eventually comes the day of the trial. So I was sitting in London. Sarah was here in Jerusalem. And what I remember before, the days before that case, was the preparation. Sitting with the lawyers for days, for weeks, sleepless nights, reading through all the statements and reading through all the material and being coached. If they ask you this and they try to trick you in this way, they ask you this, what should you say? How do you say? How do you answer? Now, we weren't being accused of anything. We weren't on trial. But nonetheless, just to step into court to take the witness stand, it's petrifying. And if you want to know what happened at the end of the day with that court case, you can come and ask me another time. It's not our subject. But the point is, the days before, like I said, Sarah was testifying live. I was sitting in Skype from my house in London, connected to the computer. And I remember sitting there waiting for the trial to begin, sweaty hands, thinking for days and days, just thinking about what we would say, how we would say it, how to respond. You don't go into court and prepare. I assume by now it's obvious why I'm telling you the story. Because in just under a week from tonight, every single one of us is sitting in court. Every single one of us is taking the witness stand. And we're on trial. We're being accused of everything. It needs preparation. You can't walk into court unprepared. And so we know that from the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur, these 10 days, they have given us the keys. They've told us what we need to do. If these 10 days are experienced correctly, they can be, and perhaps they should be, the most intense days of the year. We take on extra stringencies, we do extra mitzvot, we have extra tefillot, we spend more time learning Torah, we're nicer to each other than we normally would be. We take on every mitzvah we can think of, everything in the book. We do whatever we can for those 10 days because we want to get to Yom Kippur when the verdict is sealed and we want to have the right verdict. We want to do everything we can that just in case there is a negative decree against us. And we've just seen what can happen, what happens in the world. We want to change it. But those 10 days haven't yet begun. Rabbi Yonah says in those 10 days, a person who thinks about anything else is mad. He's insane. What are you doing? There's nothing more important right now. But that's during the 10 days. That's when we're trying to win the appeal. Why wait until the appeal when the verdict hasn't been written? Now we're at the stage where we have the chance to get it right the first time. We have the chance to get it right when we get to Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, we're sitting in court. Right now is preparation. Right now we're sitting with our lawyers. We're figuring out what to say and how to say it and what to do. I mentioned during the week that a number of years ago I saw one of these pamphlets, one of these Parshat Shavua pamphlets lying around in shul. And there was a big sign, a big page that said, prepare for Rosh Hashanah. And underneath it had a list of 30 bakeries where you could buy your desserts for Rosh Hashanah. It's not the preparation that we're talking about. There's something a little bit more important that we have. And so we have Selichot. And Selichot come around to teach us, to help us not to be caught off guard. To come in ready, to come in prepared somewhat for these auspicious days. What I'd like to share with you in the few moments that we have left, to look at why it is specifically now that we begin Selichot. Look at the halachot of this practice, the halachot of this minhag, why we begin tonight and to derive from that three very powerful messages, why we begin Selichot tonight, what that means for us, what we should be thinking about, and what we should be saying when we say this Selichot. So we know there are a number of different minhagim, a number of different practices. The Shulchan Aruch tells us that from Rosh Chodesh Elul, the Sfaradim begin saying Selichot. Wake up a little bit later. But there were other practices. In the times of the Geonim, there were communities who would say Selichot only during Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, only in the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. There were communities who had the practice, very interesting, to begin on Kaf Hei Elul. To begin on the 25th of Elul. Why the 25th of Elul? The day the world was created. Only the Jewish people can have a calendar that begins on the 25th. But our practice, as we know, is to begin tonight. The Ramah tells us, and the Mishnah Berurah explains, that there are two reasons why. Two criteria. We always begin 4 days before, at least 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. And we always begin on Motzei Shabbat. We always begin at the beginning of the week. Says the Mishnah Berurah, there should be a Yom Mesuyam. Should be a certain day on which we begin. So we begin on Motzei Shabbat, and if the Motzei Shabbat that directly precedes Rosh Hashanah is at least 4 days before, as it is this year, that's when we begin. And if it's earlier in the week, so we bring it forward to the week before. Why 4 days? So two reasons are brought as to why it should be 4 days. The Mishnah Berurah brings a minhag, which is not prevalent nowadays, that there were those who would fast for these 10 days, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Nowadays we don't fast as much as we used to. But there are 4 days in between when it is impossible to fast. The 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Shabbat Shuvah, and Erev Yom Kippur. And therefore, in order to make up for, in order to complement, to add those 4 days, an extra 4 days are added beforehand, 4 days of Selichot, 4 days of Tachanunim, 4 days asking for mercy. That is one explanation. But the second one, and I think this is more well known, I'd like to explore a little bit further with it. The second explanation is as follows, and I'll read you the language of the Mishnah Berurah. He says, "Ve'od tam shekavu arba yamim." Another reason why they established 4 days. Sheken matzinu b'korbanot sheteonim bikum imum arba yamim kodem hakrava. When one brings a korban, one brings a sacrifice, an offering in the Beit HaMikdash, it needs to be checked. It needs to be examined for 4 days. We're familiar with this from the Korban Pesach. It was taken and was tied to the bedpost 4 days before Pesach, 4 days examining it for blemishes. Says the Torah, by each and every one of the festivals, you will bring an olam, you will offer up an olam. By Rosh Hashanah, it doesn't say it. By Rosh Hashanah, it says in the Pasuk, Tiv v'asitem olah, you will make an olam. You will become an offering. ללמד שבראש השנה יעשה אדם עצמו כאילו מקריב את עצמו. On Rosh Hashanah, we are the korban. On Rosh Hashanah, we bring ourselves and we give ourselves over totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, לכן קבעו 4 ימים לבקר כל מומי חטאתו ולשוב עליהם. We have 4 days in which to inspect the korban. We have 4 days to look for blemishes, to find them, to do tshuva. And this idea of the korban, of becoming the korban of Rosh Hashanah, this appears, it repeats itself again and again throughout our davening, throughout the themes of the day. The central theme of Rosh Hashanah is the Akedah, Akedat Yitzchak. Says the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, Daf Tet Zayin, Amar Rabbi Abba, Ulama Tokin Shofar Shel Ayin. Why is it that the first preference, the shofar that we use, a ram's horn, Shofar Shel Ayin in Rosh Hashanah? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu tekfu lefanai b'shofar shel ayil. Use the shofar of the ayil, of the ram, kadei she'ezkor lachem akedat Yitzchak ben Avraham. Tell Hashem, so that I can remember for you the merit of the akedah of Yitzchak. U'ma'aleh ani alechem ki'ilu akadtem atzmechem lefanai. I will consider it as if you, right now, are sacrificing yourself. So we understand that we are bringing ourselves, that we are the korban. One brings a korban, it has to be clean. It has to be pure, it has to be free of blemish. That's why we have to check it. We have to check ourselves for at least 4 days. And what we learn from this halakha is something fundamental. Rosh always used to say, used to get very upset when people said, Amirat Slichot. You're saying Slichot. He said, we don't say Slichot. Bakashat. We ask for Slichot. We are not just saying words, it's not just lip service. We read in the Parsha this morning, it's in your mouth and in your heart. We say these words, we need to think about them. They need to do something to us. We're confessing, we're asking forgiveness, we're thinking about it, we're changing, we're introspecting, we're reflecting, we're becoming somebody else. Not just reciting a magic formula and that's it. Saying these words are doing something. This is tefillah. This is slicha. So in the same way, you have a korban, you need to check it. But we're checking it. We're checking ourselves with every word of the slichot. But the analogy only goes so far. Because what happens if somebody has a korban? What happens if somebody has their animal prepared, they want to bring it to the Beit HaMikdash, and in those 4 days before they bring it, they find a mum. They find a blemish. So what do they do with the animal? They switch it. They get rid of it. You find another animal that doesn't have a blemish, and you bring that one. So what are we meant to do? Chas v'shalom, in these 4 days, if we find those blemishes, there's sin within ourselves. Can't send somebody else on our behalf in Rosh Hashanah. There's no getting out of this. So maybe the answer we can suggest is this. Maybe the answer is, if we think a little bit more deeply, there are 2 different types of them. There's a mum kavua and there's a mum over. There is a permanent blemish and there's a temporary. And when one finds a permanent blemish in the animal, yes, you have to switch it. You have to bring a different korban. But if you find a mum over, you find a temporary blemish, well, then you just wait for it to pass until that animal is pure again. So the avodah right now, if we find those mumim, if we find those blemishes, is turning them from a mum kavua, turning them into a mum over. Understanding that the distractions and the temptations and the Yetzer Hara and the chet and the failures and the mistakes that we have made, who hasn't made mistakes? Those are not permanent. Those don't define us. That's not the essence of who we are. If we find the mum, it means we're looking for the essence. We're reminding ourselves, and if we realize the essence is something else, it's so much better than that. We can do better. That we have that greatness within us. So then the mum kavua becomes a mum over. Becomes a temporary blemish. And it passes. And then we're ready. Then we're ready to come. Then we're ready to approach as that korban. Say one other thing about the idea that when we say these words, when we say these slichot, it's not just a magical formula. There's a Gemara that seems to indicate that it is. It's a very troubling Gemara. Gemara Rosh Hashanah as well. Daf Yud Zayin says the following. You know, the center of these slichot that we'll say, beginning tonight all the way through to Yom Kippur, is the Yud Gimel Midot HaRachamim. 13 attributes of mercy. And it says in the Gemara, Ve'avor Hashem al panav vayikra. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Yamalei Mikra Katuv Yefshar Le'omer. Rabbi Yochanan says something astounding. He says if the Pasuk didn't say this, then no one could say it. But when the Pasuk says by Avor Hashem, do you know what it means? He says, Melamed shenitatef HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'shliach tzibur, that Hashem, as it were, dressed himself up with a talit as the shliach tzibur. Ve'ar'a lo leMoshe seret tefillah. God himself was the Chazan, and he said that you give him midot harachamim. And he said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Kol zman Yisrael chotin, whenever the Jewish people will sin, Yasu lefanai kaseder hazeh, you just have to repeat this. You just have to follow what I'm doing now. Say these, you give me midot harachamim, v'ani mocher lahem, and I will forgive you. And I ask you, this doesn't sound very Jewish. We can do whatever we want. We can fall as low as possible. But we come to Selichot. We say 13 magical words. 13 words. We say these magical words and everything is forgiven. Is that what it means? Is that what the Gemara is suggesting? So I believe the Gemara is suggesting something much deeper. And Rabbi Elyashiv said this, and it's already found in the Maharal, and many Mefarshim explain in this way. Say, look at the words. It doesn't say Yomru lefanai kaseder hazeh. It doesn't say what I'm saying. It says Yasu lefanai kaseder hazeh. It says do what I'm doing. We have to emulate the 13 attributes of mercy. We have to become like Hashem. When we say these words, it's not just about what we're saying, but it's about thinking who we are and how we treat each other and what we do. And if we become more godly in our actions and our ways and our thoughts and our words, then we are guaranteed we'll have forgiveness. So that's number one. That's number one. That's our job in these 4 days. This year we have an extra day or two as well. Introspection, reflection. Becoming somebody different through these words, becoming somebody else, turning their mum kavua into a mum over, into a temporary blemish, getting rid of it, and coming ready on Rosh Hashanah. Why do we begin on Motzei Shabbat? Why specifically the first day of the week? So said the Mishnah Berurah. Some years it's 4 days, some years it's more. We always start the same day of the week. And again, I ask you, Rosh Hashanah falls on a different day of the week every year. Selichot can fall on a different day of the week every year. Why does it have to be now? Is there a deeper message? One of the things that we say, B'motzei menucha kidam nucha tchila. Motzei menucha, on Motzei Shabbat, after a day, kidam nucha tchila, we've come before you. Translate exactly into English. We've come before you first. We've come before you early. We've preceded. This is the proof that Ashkenazim have a sense of humor. I remember when I was in Yeshiva, the whole month of Elul, the Sfardim were walking around, they're red, tired. They've been saying the whole month, they've been saying Selichot. Yeah, a few days before Rosh Hashanah, finally we wake up. You remember, oh, it's Rosh Hashanah. Shkoyach. We've come early, we're 3 weeks late. What are we saying? So maybe what we're saying is this. Kidam nucha tchila means, I mentioned before, there was a different minhag to begin Selichot on Kaf Hei El, on the day the world was created. We might think to ourselves, when should we begin? When do we have to step up to the plate? When we go back to Rosh Hashanah, the day that we were created. That's the beginning. On Rosh Hashanah itself, we say, Hayom Harat Olam, today the world was born. It's not true. The world was born earlier on the 25th, 6 days before. Man was born in Rosh Hashanah. But the world was born before. And maybe the message of Kidam Nuchat Tchila is this. In one word, I would say, Achrayut. It's about responsibility. It's about the fact that I believe and I understand and I recognize that my actions matter. They change things. That it's not just about me. The Gemara in Kiddushin, the Rambam brings us to Halacha, says, L'olam yireh adam atzmo kilu chetzio chayav v'chetzio zakai. Person should always view themselves 50-50. Talk more about this tomorrow. That a person should view themselves exactly half. The scales are evenly poised. Half to the side of good, half to the side of bad. But then says the Gemara, don't just view yourself that way. View your entire country that way. View the entire world that way. And understand that what you do affects not just you, it affects the entire world. It affects all of creation. We're not here in a vacuum. We're not here by ourselves. Everything we do has an effect on our communities, effect on our people, an effect on the world. So whether we go by, there was the practice that went back to the date of creation, and we have a practice that goes back to the day of creation. We're saying we're getting up here, we're taking responsibility. I understand that the things I do, it's not just about me, it's about the whole world. And everything that I do and everything that I say matters. And you can change things. There's another reason that's brought as to why we begin Selichot on Motzei Shabbat. Fascinating. The Trumat Hadeshen. Trumat Hadeshen says we begin on Motzei Shabbat in order to go from Oneg Shabbat into Selichot. We want to go from the joy, from the happiness of Shabbat, and from there we go, that is the most appropriate time to begin Selichot. You've been listening to me for the last 20 minutes. There's something daunting about this. This is intimidating if we experience it correctly. This is doesn't seem to be the happiest occasion. But there is something happy. There is that sense of opportunity. The joy is in that opportunity that we can come back, that we can reconnect, that whatever mistakes we've made, we can get up and we can do better. And we can reconnect with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, we can reconnect with ourselves, we can reconnect with our people, we can reconnect with everything. There is a tremendous simcha. We have to work hard, we have to dig deep to find it. But let me share with you a story that I saw this week. Tremendously, I believe this is a very inspiring story. We'll leave you with this to go into Selichot. Mentioned the earthquake took place. I prepared this before. Well, I'd known there would be such a tragedy. But in 1988, going back about 35 years, there was a devastating earthquake in Armenia. 25,000 people were killed. And this is a story, and I know that not every story, there are many, these kind of things happen. Be careful here what I say, there are many tragedies. But not every story like this ends well. We remember that and we recognize it. And we recognize the frailty and the difficulty. But this particular individual, this particular story, what happened was this. This earthquake took place in Armenia. And people ran out into the streets to find their loved ones. Parents ran to their children's schools, and there was one father who ran to his child's school, and he found it had been flattened, it had been razed to the ground. And there was no hope. And all the other onlookers cried. But this crazy father said, I'm not giving up. He said, I always told my son I will be there for him no matter what, and I will keep that promise. And he walked up to the site and he began to dig. He began to pick up stones, and people thought he had lost his mind. They tried to take him away. It was disturbing the rescue effort. He wouldn't budge. And some people looked at him and said he was crazy. Some people started to help. An hour, 2 hours, 12 hours. He was digging for 38 hours. And after 38 hours, he heard a voice crying out to him from the rubble. He called out to his son, and his son called out back to him. And miraculously, there had been a concrete slab that had formed a cavity in such a way that that son, together with 13 other classmates, were there under the rubble. They all survived. And as he was digging away, he got to the 38th hour, he was digging away, he called out his son's name, Aman. And his son called out, Papa. And when he came out, he said, I know you've always told me that you will always be there for me no matter what, and I knew that you would come, and I told all my friends, don't worry, my father will come to save. Now I know that the story is 1 in a million. This is a miracle, and most of these stories don't end this way. But we all have a father who will never give up on us. I tell the story because it brings home to us, no matter how much rubble there is on top of us, no matter how much dirt, no matter what we have done, no matter how far we have gone, Avinu Shabashamayim is just waiting for us to come back. Waiting for us to come back. And tonight begins this process, begins the time we just have to do a little bit. We just have to take a few steps. And he'll lift up all the stones, he'll clear up all the rubble, and he'll bring us home, he'll bring us back to sleep. So those are the 3 points, those are 3 things to think about tonight as we begin Selichot. We begin 4 days before Rosh Hashanah, because for 4 days you need to check a korban. Because in 4 days' time, we will all be that korban. We need to make sure that there are no blemishes. And as we say those words of Selichot, they need to mean something. They need to penetrate into the heart and change us and cause us to think about them as we sing them, as we say them. Change. We say it on Motzei Shabbat because Motzei Shabbat is the day going back to Yom Rishon. We're going back to the time when the world was created. When we're thinking about our world, we go beyond ourselves. We think about how much responsibility we have, how much opportunity we have to change, to inspire, to uplift, to change the world around us. And we begin tonight, very, very soon after Shabbat, because we still have the simcha, we still have the joy of Shabbat, and we have the joy knowing that we are all coming, that we are all saved. Lishmoa el arina ve'el tefillah. But hearing the song, hearing the tefillah, may those words as we say them tonight and all the way through to Rosh Hashanah, to Yom Kippur, the entire year, in fact, penetrate our hearts, penetrate our minds. May we do the work that we need to. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer us in turn, and may we all be blessed for a happy, healthy year. Amen.